This is Kevin Lawmeister. This is Module 14. I'm going to talk about a case study here and what needs to be changed and what I think goes well with this case study. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify the problem of what's going on here. Here's what happened is Miss Tate, who's a teacher, she works in a district. It's made up of wealthy families. Dr. Harvey is the principal of this district. He receives numerous phone calls about the rigor of Miss Tate's classroom. One day, Miss Tate received an email containing a link to a Facebook page, and the Facebook page had a comment stating, "Who wants Miss Tate to disappear?" So Miss Tate's pretty distraught. She runs to the principal and says, "Hey, someone's going to kill me," and now she's kind of freaking out. So those are all kind of facts over there, some not guaranteed facts. One of the things that the principal asked her is, "Hey, do you think you have any idea who makes this page?" And her thoughts were, "Well, it's got to be William Hall. He hates me. He makes comments about me in class." But that's not a proven fact that he made this website. Also, another thing that's kind of assumed here is Miss Tate's life was threatened, where really the only comment here was, "Who wants her to disappear?" And the last thing that is probably kind of assumed, I'm assuming the reason they're studying is the wealthy schools, that parents are willing to side with their students because they're wealthy. A lot of, I think it's under the assumption a lot of wealthy families feel their kids can do no wrong, and or they don't want that bad rap for their family, so they're going to side with their students no matter what. Really, there's two things we need to know for this case that we don't, and that's who made the website / email. She received an email first with a link on it, and then she also clicked on the link and got to a website, which was a Facebook page. So we want to know who the creators of those were, and then the really big question is, do they intend to harm Miss Tate? Those are the two big questions. Here's the problem. There have been no direct threats. When you look at study.com and look at the definition of what a threat is, a verbal threat becomes criminal threat under the circumstance that basically you're indicating someone else will suffer imminent physical harm. In this case, no one is saying they're going to harm Miss Tate. They could simply mean who doesn't want her as a teacher. They could say they wish she would teach somewhere else. But making her disappear does not necessarily mean they're going to kill her. So that's one of the big problems about this case, is that we aren't even sure what kind of threat this is. Here's another problem. We have no clue who made this threat. It could be a student. It could be another teacher. It could be the principal himself. Who knows? And then the last thing is it's hard to move on in this case because you don't want to start making accusations against kids who you think is the problem, but not guaranteed to be the problem. So here's my plan of action. First thing I would do if I was principal is I would assure Ms. Tate that we're looking seriously into the situation. We're not taking it lightly, and that there will be follow-up. I want to give her an added presence, make sure that I'm around her classroom and I'm invested in figuring out what's going on here. And I'm also going to continue to monitor the website for any new information. It's a social media page, so it's up for comment, and whoever can comment on it and is willing to will do so. The next thing I would do is make sure I don't jump to conclusions. The questioning the students aspect of this, I'm going to hit on a little bit later. The big thing I want to make sure that I would never do is accuse, "Hey, why did you make this website?" That's something that open a whole nother can of worms, especially with the family and stuff. That just shows kind of a biased opinion toward that student, even if they've had a past of making trouble and stuff. I'm not going to outright accuse anyone without having some facts in front of me. The reason to do this is I want students to feel comfortable in the classroom, not make them feel as if they're being viewed as a suspect. So again, I'm only going to use the facts. Since the website's Facebook, this is what I would do is if it's a Facebook website, you need a profile to interact with it, and that that should be easily identifiable. You should use your name for Facebook. Pretty much everyone does. So I would look closer into that Facebook post and see if I could come up with some names of people who are interacting with that website. If the student is found, then I would bring up their intentions with the proper grouping. What I mean by that is that I would get the necessary. I'd probably get their parents involved and maybe the superintendent if it needs to happen. If it is found viable, or resource officer or something along that line. But in the end, what I really want to do is I want to involve as few people as possible. I don't want to make this a school-wide ordeal. I don't want news media coming in and saying there's threats in the school and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to keep this as limited as possible so that the environment of the schools continues to stay safe. How my plan would promote success for all students. Students can succeed because there's no obvious bias option or opinions in the class. Basically, I'm not going to go in and take the three boneheads who've been mean to Miss Tate all year and say, you, and you, one of you three made the website. I'm going to take everything into consideration. And so with that being said, students can still feel comfortable both in mine and Miss Tate's presence without feeling like they're being judged. They're not being distracted by questioning, and they have the support of the principal. So in debriefing here, things that the principal did that I think would go right. I like that he printed a hard copy of the email/website. It is possible to delete these things. And so even though you can access it now, when Ms. Tate sends the link, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be there later. So I like that he printed a hard copy kind of as proof in case something does expand from this. I think that reassuring Ms. Tate that you're going to look into it, I totally agree with that. A good administrator, I think, is going to actually follow through with that, though, and not just say that to get her to calm down. And one of the other things I really liked that the principal said, was he's going to consult with the tech coordinator. I've come to find out in my previous years of teaching that kids are not very smart sometimes. And so it's very possible this could have been made on a school computer, an email sent from a computer, something like that. So if I do have some suspects, such as William, I would check his history first, because there's nothing wrong with that. If he's on the school internet, then we have the right to that information. So that's much better than going up and confronting him first. What I think could go wrong. The first thing the principal says is, I'm going to talk to William Hall tomorrow and see if he's the one. William Hall is probably one of the later steps in my interview process, because William Hall is going to play the victim card. He's probably not going to fess up, even if he is the one that made the website. I don't know his family at all, but if you start a war with the family and stuff, there's a lot of things that go wrong. And worst case scenario here is William Hall is the one that did not make the website. And so if you're writing him hard on making this website and it turns out not to be him, that really puts a damper on your relationship between you and that family. So he's probably not the first kid I would question. I would say that I've actually had incidents like this in the past where I've suspected someone of something. And so what I tend to do is I tend to pick the kid who I don't think has anything to do with it. And someone that I'm willing to trust. And I would say, hey, can you tell me something about this situation? Actually, the situation I was dealing with, it really wasn't a legal thing, but just a meaning of a word that kids were using. And I said, hey, I know that you don't use this word, but could you tell me if you know any information about it? Because what you're doing there is you're gathering information from someone while at the same time saying, I trust you're not the one that's doing this. And so therefore you're not ruining relationships there. I can't really tell from the case study whether or not they're actually treating this comment as a conclusive threat. Again, I defined what a threat is earlier, and this is not malice, or this is not something that you can really hold someone accountable for. So I think if that's what they're doing, I think that's wrong. But I would look into it still. And then the last thing, and this is not so necessarily something that the principal is doing, but I just want to make sure that it's something you wouldn't do, is not following up. Telling Miss Tate you're going to follow up and not following up. That's one of the biggest weaknesses I've seen in administrators in my career is administrator says they're going to do something, you feel good about it, and then they completely don't do that. So you got to make sure you follow what you say. What I think needs to happen, we need to find who makes this website, who sent her the email. I think there's several ways you could go about that, but you just got to approach it cautiously. The intent of the comment is also needs to come out as someone being silly, as someone actually wanting to hurt Miss Tate. And again, I think that's something that can be done, but it needs to be done in the right manner. And then a guideline for what needs to happen next. Once it is established what the intent was, we need to set up some guidelines like, hey, here's what happens if we get some other sort of threat, or maybe it was a threat. Then we need to say, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's the course of action that needs to take place now that you've threatened to hurt this teacher. So we need to make a next step as well. In relating to Standard 5, I'm going to answer some questions here. As the educational leader of the building, how would I act with integrity so that every student can succeed? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be honest with both Miss Tate and the students. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat things. I found the best policy that I've seen within administration, I think as a teacher as well, is that just giving straight up facts and saying how things are is the best way to go about it. I would need to tell Miss Tate that, hey, listen, this isn't a threat. I'm not going to try and make myself look better by trying to take her side and saying, hey, for sure this is a threat just to make her feel better when really it's not. And that kind of goes along with my second point here, making stuff up just to get through the situation. Don't be lazy about it and just say things just to get through it, and then this ends up turning into something else, because that's not having integrity at all. And then giving students facts and not hiding things from them as well. Again, I think just honesty is the best policy in this situation. Fairness, as far as fairness goes, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I know as an educator, we all have those students who you immediately suspect is the culprit. And I would say about 90% of the time we're right when we jump to those conclusions. But at the same time, in this situation, accusing William of making the website would be wrong. Yes, he is a suspect. Yes, it's probably something that I do take into consideration, but I'm not going to immediately rule out anything else just because this one kid is the constant bother in her class. And that kind of goes with using past situations. Maybe Miss Tate has had a history of complaining to the administrator saying, hey, I'm afraid of this. Hey, I'm afraid of that. And she kind of becomes that person that cries wolf. You can't really take that into consideration either, because if it is a viable threat and you don't follow through, then you're in trouble. And then last but not least, being fair, I only use facts to support my claims. If the tech person does come up with some facts, then that could be used to help figure out what the next step is. As far as being ethical goes, which I think kind of goes with the first part, acting with integrity, I'm not going to take sides by past actions. I'm going to try and come in here and view it as a neutral standpoint, regardless of what's happened in the past. Following through, not just saying things to calm people down. Again, just being what you say you're going to be. And of course, ensuring that the incident is confined to as few people as possible. Because we don't need to, kids in the class don't need to be hearing the administrator or the teacher saying, hey, we think William made this website. Does anyone have any backup on that? Because then what you're doing is you're putting that label on William. So we want to include as few people as possible, not use names and stuff like that, and try not to make this more than what it is. Here's the references I've used. Hopefully this helps your decisions in the future. Thank you.